All right, so Trinidad and Tobago, we are here with yet another episode of Inspire TT. We are in a virtual setting. I mean, many of you would have seen our last few episodes, which actually we have been doing virtually because we want to flatten that curve, because we are nowhere in a time of COVID-19, the pandemic, and especially in Trinidad and Tobago, we are seeing the numbers, rising. That's rising, but it has been going down since we have instituted some more restrictions from curfew to the state of emergency. So definitely, Michael. So today, Michael, tell us what we'll be seeing today.
Today is a very interesting Inspire TT. We actually crossed the border, but we're keeping it safe digital because we also understand that this pandemic has allowed us to be able to grow as well in Inspire TT. So we reached out to our brother who's living in Brooklyn. He has Trini roots and he has a very interesting story. He helps at-risk youth in Trinidad as well. So without further ado, let's go to that interview with Marlon Peterson. What do you say?
The heavy-handed approach is not what's necessarily working, right? The heavy-handed approach is what got us the booming prison system in the first place. You need to be going deeper and to really sort of get into the root of why it's happening, because in the early 90s, people can just dismiss it as saying it was the crack era. Well, it ain't the crack era anymore, and people still getting killed. So instead of thinking about what we need to stop, we need to be thinking about what we want to create in our neighborhoods.
So Trinidad and Tobago, we are here on Inspire TT, definitely one of our episodes where we're actually crossing the border of talking to Trinidadians outside of Trinidad and Tobago. Basically, Marlon here, who has been doing a lot of advocacy work across the US and not just the US, I think globally in regards of social justice and also dealing with at-risk youth as well. And definitely, Marlon, it's a pleasure to you taking out your busy time. I know I'm seeing the book over your shoulder, Bird Uncaged, one of his latest publications that went viral. I know it's been selling globally as well, and I see some Trinidadians get their hands on it to really get a sense of their story, Marlon. So definitely, it's a pleasure. Michael.
Hi, Marlon. Marlon, it's good to see you, man. Tell the audience where you're from and what exactly you do.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on Inspire TT. I met you some years ago, and it's always inspiring to see the work and the continuation of the work that you have been doing down there in Trinidad. So it's an honor to be here now at this point in time. So I'm based in Brooklyn, New York. I'm actually born in Brooklyn, New York. My entire family is from Trinidad, St. James particularly, and in town. And I've been, I've been back and forth to Trinidad ever since I was in my mother's stomach. So I've been back a million times, and can't wait till the borders open back up so I can actually come back down again. And a lot of work I've been doing, as Atul mentioned, right now. So as an author, I have a book out, a memoir that speaks a lot of my experiences, but also just thinking about the trauma and the underlying reasons why young people in particular, stray left a different direction from where their families have been, how to raise them up to be, or their community raise them up to be. And that comes understanding that from a lot of my travels. So not only my own experiences and somebody who in America here, unfortunately did a decade in prison. But since then, in the decade plus that I've been home, I've been able to sort of work, create and be around a lot of young people, create programming, youth empowerment, youth development programs, been able to visit a lot of prisons around America, as well as in other parts of the country, and as well as visit, spend time with young people in Trinidad in my visits. So, a lot of this book that I have now is pretty much like a culmination of a lot of work I've done pretty much over the last 15 years.
And Marlon, that's a very interesting perspective. I'm really glad that we were able to cross the border and Inspire TT. Guys, if you see in the video, share at the bottom of the screen. We're trying to bring unique content here on Inspire TT. Marlon, what has it been like, your particular journey? You say you was in prison for 10 years as well. And obviously that inspired the book.
And talking about the experience I had, in the moment of those experiences, it was terrible. It was hard. It was difficult. It felt like there was no way out in the moment of the experiences. So I say that to sort of empathize with young folks, particularly now who may have opportunity to see, but even adults as well, right? In the moment of the trial, you may say the experience is very difficult and it's hard to see a way out. But the other part of it is that I also know through the journey, through the experiences, that there were lessons that I was able to learn. There are always lessons to be learned from it, right? And I'm not saying that I want people to go through, difficult trials and tribulations to learn lessons. Obviously, part of the reason why I wrote this book and the work I've done over the years is so that people don't go through the trials and tribulations. But we also know we live in a society where a lot of these things are inevitabilities, particularly for people who come from certain parts of our society, right? And particularly marginalized groups. And what I'm saying is that, like, my message, at least my experience in terms of inspiration, is that, you know, I went through the things that I've gone through. I went through extraordinary experiences to be able to sort of share extraordinary a level of extraordinary inspiration for other folks. And as I said, it's not always easy to see that in the moment. But once you come through the moment, when you come through that time, that period, whatever it may be, whether it be a day or 10 years in my case, there are lessons that we can glean from it that are not only for our benefit, but for the benefit of other people.
Marlon, I know that you have created your own foundation, your own brand, and tell us a bit about that, because some Trinidadians may not know that despite you're based in Brooklyn and you know you have spent back and forth, you actually have been doing work on the ground here in Trinidad and in at-risk communities. Some of the communities that some people will be watching Inspire TT have never even ventured that you would have come and take part of.
Well, I'm from the hood in Brooklyn, right? So I don't want to, you know, a lot of my travels throughout America, but also to other countries, including Trinidad, I've been able to be welcomed into certain communities that many people won't be able to be welcome to. And so in coming to Trinidad, you know, I spend time in a lot of the places that a lot of, you know, Trinidadians don't want to go to, right? Right on town in Queen Street and C lots, you know, so parts of Laventille, Beatum, you know, all those type of places. And, you know, I've been welcomed in those particular communities. And I'd say the reason why I was in those sort of spaces is that as a person who I still consider Trinidad home, right? Even though I was not born in Trinidad, I don't have a strong Trinidadian accent. It's like, that's how I was raised. My siblings were raised to understand Trinidad is home for us, right? And that's why my parents brought us back so often. I understand that in some of these communities, like access to opportunities is similar just to what I have, the issues that we have here. Like, we don't have access to certain opportunities. And a lot of these issues are generational. So for me to come to Trinidad, it's for me to be like, I often hear, particularly here in the States, you know, there's so much shooting and crime and this and this and this and this. And I understand it. Like, I understand that is a real thing. But I also understand, like, it's important to understand the why these things are happening in certain communities. So for me coming to these communities, or even doing trainings, I've done trainings in South. Like, me, is part of me is sort of just really getting an understanding of what's beneath the violence that in so many ways sadly stereotypes certain communities. Because in these communities, the entire community is not engaging in violence. Like, you go to Sea Lodge, you go to Beatum, like the entire Beatum is not engaging in violence. It's a small part of that community that is, people there. And even for that small group of people, what I've been able to learn, and just not even learn, but affirm and confirm from my experiences of being in here, somebody who was involved in violence as a kid here in New York, that there are reasons, they're not excuses, but there are reasons, a lot of that why people get involved with these sort of things. And a lot of it is social inequities. And if I can just give one example, I was in Upper Gonzales some years ago, and I'm in a community meeting. They have a small community meeting up the hill, and you know, they're talking about these older women always the ones taking care of the communities, and they're talking about the things they need to do and trying to raise money to buy school books and bags and all kind of things. And there's a fellow who was in the room, and he's around my age, he's in the mid-30s at the time, and he has said, you know, one of the things we need to think about is the literacy of adults like me who can't read. And for, you know, as a, you know, pride and ego, for a man to say that in a room with people, particularly me, who he just met, it was a level of vulnerability that I really respected. Came to find out he was also somebody in that community people may want, who people would not want to be around. I'll just put it out there like that. But the reason why I bring that particular experience, because there's a level of vulnerability that even in people we don't want to be around, that we are able to sort of find the space and create the space where they can sort of share what's really bothering them. Being in your 30s and not being able to read is a prison in of itself. That's a cage. Yeah. And when you're in cages, you try to do whatever you can to get out. And whatever you do to get out may not be productive. And what I'm saying, I'm trying to give reason, I'm trying to give biography to these experiences of people, because somebody like me, if somebody looked for face value at some of the things I was involved with in the past, they may think, well, he is a throwaway person. And I don't believe in throwaway people.
So what we have seen and observed, Marlon, from your visits here and seeing where we are now in Trinidad and Tobago, especially the pandemic stepping in, what are your views as some of the stuff that you can see being fixed, especially in some of these at-risk communities in Trinidad and Tobago?
It's interesting you asked that, right? Yeah, I've had conversation with folks in Trinidad, and I want to say by no means am I the expert of Trinidad, right? I want people to think Marlon is the expert. I am not the expert of Trinidad, right? But just in my experiences, one of the things I think about is I visited YTC and spent time with young people in YTC, and to see that there are young people who've been in jails, wait 10 years and more, waiting for a disposition, waiting to find out what's going to happen to them, right? I did 10 years after a conviction. They're waiting to find out if they're going to be convicted. And I just want to use that one example because there's a level of trauma that goes through the community of that person, right? That person's connected to a parent, an aunt, an uncle, a grandmother, whatever, right? That's a ripple effect. And that's just one example of like how one thing that is systemic, that's a systemic judicial problem, right? And how one systemic thing may seem like, well, they deserve that. They shouldn't be, they're in jail, they deserve that. First of all, they haven't been convicted, so we don't know what they deserve. But the other part of it is that there's a level of trauma that incarceration spills into the entire community, right? So the community where that one or two or three people are from, and we usually can probably guess what communities a lot of these young folks are from, there's a ripple effect that pervades throughout the community. And that's just an example of, the judicial system. But there's also, just like similar as they are here, there are social inequities. There's a level of neglect for certain parts of our communities here in Brooklyn or there in Trinidad. And we shouldn't be surprised when we get the type of outcomes when we get, which is violence, which is the disrespect of women, which is, high increased incarceration. Like these are consequences of a lot of systemic neglect of certain places and certain types and groups of people.
Coming into a bit of your success, I know you were on TEDx as well.
So I gave a TED talk a couple of years ago. The title of it is "Am I Not Human? A Call for Criminal Justice Reform." Did relatively well, and I was given the opportunity. It's sort of like the opportunity presented itself, and I decided, well, why not use this opportunity, not only just to talk for talk's sake, but to use this opportunity, this platform to shed light on larger issues. And in that talk, just to the highlight of it, actually I started by talking about steel pan. If you ever watch the talk, I started by talking about steel pan, and in so many ways it's really quick that steel pan was created quote unquote out of garbage. It's just sort of just thinking about the oil drums, and wow, we create this instrument with an entire chromatic scale that's all over the world now, right? And in a community where people neglect. Just think about the power and the possibilities of certain communities, right? But also I use that analogy or that metaphor in the talk to speak about people like me. Like there are people who like me who people may consider as stowaway, as garbage. And I wanted to show that there's possibility in all of our people, right? And particularly I went to prison for a violent crime, right? So I speak about it, I write about it. If you get the book, I speak about it in detail. I write about it in detail, and in the talk I do. But I'm also saying it's difficult to find humanity in people who have harmed people. I'm not saying that that's easy work. I'm not saying it's easy to somebody did something to a person, harmed them physically, or even took their life, and you want to find some level of empathy for the person who did that harm. That's not easy work. But I am sort of pushing and even using that talk as a platform on any stage that I get, is that we have to get to the root of why people are doing the things that they're doing. And the only way you get to the root, part of the noise in the background, but the only way we get to the root of why it is that people are doing is that you have to find the humanity in that person. You have to do the hard work. That's hard work, right? But we also understand that neglecting groups of people, not affording full humanity to some people or groups of people, creates conditions where the entire community is sort of seen as inhumane, where now you have entire parts of, just using Trinidad as an example, you have entire parts of Trinidad that don't see parts of Trinidad as worthy of human. We're human, we don't want to go there, forget them, drive right past it, right? Burn it down. These sort of things, people speak about human beings. And that's largely because we're not able to afford humanity to people who even do things that we wouldn't want to be around.
Guys, this is a different Inspire TT, different topic. We're trying to bring, and as I said before in the beginning of the link, we're trying to bring different perspectives here in Trinidad, because just like the pandemic, the only way we could change Trinidad, Inspire TT tagline is be the change, is that if we all understand the picture that we're in, the reality that we're in now, and where we want to go. Marlon, for the audience members out there who want to be asking the obvious question, because the obvious question that I was asking, you're talking about the roots and the root. What was that root thing that said, you know what, I am as an individual need to change and change from going from negative and start making the positive difference in your life?
Yeah, I mean, it happened. The root for me, often people ask me, well, like, what made you go to prison? And there's actually the incident, there's a thing, there's a crime that happened, and there's no secret to it, right? But I went deeper than that. And for me, the reason why I ended up in prison is that because there were things that happened to me as a young person, very difficultly, very traumatic things, physical abuse, sexual abuse, things that happened to me as a young person, as a kid, as a child, that I never spoke to anyone about. And in so many ways, it felt, I felt as if like I was alone on this world. Although I had a good family background, I want to, the things that happened to me happened outside my house, right? And that because of certain things, like, well, you can't say this because people are gonna look at you as soft, you're gonna be like a punk if people know these sort of things. And there's terms we use here, toxic masculinity and all these sort of things. Like, you feel you gotta prove yourself. And for me, that I felt like, well, sharing my trauma, my pain, the abuse that happened to me wouldn't give me the sort of approval of my peers, right? And so I had to figure out, at that time, I decided, well, I'm gonna be a different type of person. I'm gonna stop being an honor roll student. I'm gonna stop being this kid that writes and do these other things and hang outside more, because this is the way where I can get my community approval, right? And so speaking about, and be clear, like, most people who get physically and sexually abused don't do those things, but we shouldn't be surprised when they do. Especially when there is no outlet and there aren't services and opportunities for people to air out and speak about these things without feeling as if something is wrong with them, right? And for me, so there's a root of trauma and abuse that led me to feel as if I need to be a different type of person. And if you draw a line through anybody who went through certain things, or you might see an incarcerated or who went a part of this gang or whatever, you can always draw a line. You can find a line of something. So even like that gentleman who I spoke about earlier, who spoke about, not being literate in his mid-30s, that's a line. That's something. That's a real thing. That's not no minor thing, right? Where somebody's as adult carry, there's trauma in that. There's shame in that, right? People make fun of you, and that to the point when you're in your 20s, you don't want to tell anybody about that. People make fun of. What do you mean you carry? You know what I mean? And I'm just saying, you can't get jobs. It's important for us to be able to always dig deeper and get to the root of things, even as individuals. I was not even thinking about like why other people are doing it, why, think about us as individuals, their habits, traits, behaviors that we have that we know as individuals we're not 100% proud of, right? You know what I mean? It may not be physically harming anyone, but we know just think about it that we're not proud of. And if we trace to why we're acting that way, it usually is something that happened that we're still reacting to in the present moment, right? So, in the book, the first part of the book is called, title at least, is called Bird Uncaged. And the second half of the title of the book is an abolitionist freedom song. And abolition is really about getting to the root of why things are happening. And I think it's important work for us to do as individuals and definitely as a society.
Before I give way to my colleague Otto, to my friend Otto, one of the other questions that popped in my mind, and I think is very relevant, we have an education system, but one of the things that have been reoccurring in this conversation is if we are really and genuinely being educated. That's one question that popped in my mind. And the second question is, how important is being educated for somebody like yourself, Marlon, to be able to get the opportunities to actually access and be the change?
Malcolm X said education is a passport to success, right? So there's no question that education is essential. It's absolutely essential, I think, and particularly equitable education and historically correct and accurate information. And also, like, modernize education, right? I think that's all that's important. But I also say with an asterisk, a little bit of a footnote. Education alone, individual endeavors of education, individual success of education is always somewhat, we also have to weight that upon like systemic issues. So, you know, you live in certain areas, you come from certain areas, you can have all the education in the world. There's still that issue of access, right? And opportunity. And I so I always put as an asterisk that as a society, we have to be doing this work, not only to reward people who have been able to attain education at any level, but also to provide the opportunities for them to practice what they've learned through that education.
So guys, for those who are watching online and on television, this is Inspired to be with Marlon Peterson, on author. He's not renowned yet, but I know he'll be renowned in a few years with his first publication. Has strong Trinidad and Tobago roots. He's based in Brooklyn, USA, and he has been doing workings for social justice and so many different things in regards of reformation for criminal systems in the US and different parts, especially, you know, he's still connected to Trinidad as home. And definitely, Marlon, you know, we're going to dive a bit into the book. I mean, what would have, you know, because I know that you would have done a lot of work in regards to, you know, speeches and certain papers and stuff you would have worked along with. But why the book? What would have engaged you to go in that direction?
Writing, I think I realized, you know, part of what got me through incarceration, me realizing like, oh man, I used to write. I like this, right? I first started writing as a middle school student, right, for a local newspaper here, right. So I think I'm a writer at core. So that's the one thing, you know, I wanted to be able to write in the long form, and a book is obviously, you know, 60,000 words. Can't get much longer than that, right? But also, it's important for us as people, particularly Black folks, people of color, brown folks. It's important for us to document our histories, right? It's important. I can't emphasize that enough. The written word is the way we have, as humans just in general, have always communicated the best. It's how societies are created. It's how governments are manifested. And I think that, you know, me writing this book it was, somebody compared this book, somebody who I deeply respect, a scholar here in America, who I deeply respect, compared the book that I wrote to like a slave narrative. And slave narratives are how we connect to our past, how we understood what happened, but also how they found joy and liberation and freedom within that experience. And for me, like, I didn't know that's what I was doing when I was writing it, obviously, but I knew that I wanted to write something that would liberate me, because as I spoke about literacy being a type of cage or illiteracy being a type of cage, incarceration was only one of the cages that I dealt with. It was obviously the biggest one, the most dramatic one, but it was only one of the cages. So this book for me also was, for what it's worth, it's also a selfish endeavor. It was an opportunity for me to get to the root of a lot of the things that I got myself involved with, even still behaviors that I have now that I'm not 100% proud of, right? I don't think we get to a point in our humanhood where we say, well, I'm perfect now. You know, it doesn't work that way, right? You know, I mean, we're definitely not harming each other. I'm not harming people physically or emotionally even anymore. But like, it's still a practice. And this book helped me in my own practice of healing. In many ways, this book was a spiritual journey for me.
Definitely an inspirational story, Marlon. And for those who, you know, this is the first time you're hearing the name Marlon Peterson, you can definitely grab this book. Your book, where can we get this book, Marlon?
Well, there's a thing now. So it's available everywhere, right? But I don't know if it's quite yet available in Trinidad. So we're working on that. We're actually working on that now to be able to make it available in Trinidad. We are trying to do some events in Trinidad. I'm obviously reach out to you, Otto, too. Everything is pandemic pause. Everything is a pandemic pause.
And hence the reason why we're actually in this virtual space with Inspire TT now, because of, you know, the increased numbers we are seeing.
I had intentions of being here in June. I had intentions of being in Trinidad this June, like the beginning of June, and it didn't work out.
Well, hopefully we should be able to, you know, Michael, be able to go outside, because I hope that we ramp up our vaccination and definitely get to be able to go outside. But again, Marlon, it's a pleasure to have you on Inspire TT. definitely when you're here, we can definitely do the physical aspect of the interview. We can delve a little deeper in the book because I'm sure a lot of Trinidadians would be interested to see the connection with Brooklyn born, but Trinidad parentage, grew up most of the time in Trinidad, but still have that connectivity with the red, white, and black. Definitely sells us, and I know you fly the flag high as well too. So definitely,
absolutely,
it's a pleasure to have you on this part tonight.
Maybe others are asking the same questions. Why name the book Bird Uncaged?
Deeply inspired by Dr. Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou is poet, writer, singer, former calypso singer, apparently all the things, right? And I read her book during my incarceration. I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings. It was her memoir. And so like it always kind of it deeply impacted me. In so many ways, this was like I've dedicated part of the book to her too, even though I've never met Maya Angelou. So that's where the title comes from, where it's inspired from. I finished this book during the pandemic, so there's one thing that came out of it. I finished it last September, you know. There's always blessings amid what may seem humongous curses.
Thank you, Marlon. Thank you for coming here on Inspire TT. That's a beautiful way to end today's segment.
Definitely.
Guys, we were able to cross the border here today. We spoke to Marlon, who's all the way in Brooklyn. He was able to tell us his story, his Trinidadian roots, what inspires him, the change he's trying to see in his own community, the change he's trying to bring here in Trinidad and Tobago. And I am hoping that his story helps inspire others out there to understand that even though if you come from different backgrounds and different environments, once you're conscious about yourself, your community, where you want to be, you can be a change and be the change in your own community. Thank you, Marlon. Thank you once again for reaching out to us so that we can bring your story in this digital space and so that we can be able to give it to the wider public how we're all being affected and how we can all be the change.
I want to give a shout out to Queen Street, Nelson and George Street. People don't, Nelson and Duncan Street, but I want to give a shout out to them. There's family there as well as St. James and Sawa.
All right, thank you, Marlon.
Take care, Marlon.